Theodore Finch had spent so many nights in the projection booth of the Majestic that his pulse now beat in sync with the rattle of sprockets. From dusk until the last cigarette butt glowed to ash, he threaded reels, checked gates, and watched the white beam cut through dust motes to bloom upon the screen. The world below, clapping, coughing, shuffling shoes, was only a rumor that floated up through the vent. His true companions were the figures who lived inside the flicker, none more luminous than Leela Vale. She was the last great rose of the silent era, an actress who could, with the tilt of her eyebrow, detonate a theater's collective heart. Theodore had first seen her at 16, sneaking into a matinee when he should have been hauling crates at the docks. A decade on, his life still orbited her image. He knew every contour of her face, the precise moment her chin trembled before tears, and the mathematical perfection of her final smile at fade out. He could have challenged thread any one of her films blindfolded. Sound pictures were coming, yes, but he waved away the articles and scoffed at the phonograph-tethered contraptions studios now hawked. To Theodore, Lila's silent eloquence was the true voice of cinema. On a winter evening in 1929, the theater emptied after a revival of Lila's melodrama Heart of the Orchard. Theodore lingered to rewind reels. Snow pecked the windows, the lobby chandeliers dimmed, and the Majestic's doors clanged shut below. When the last reel slapped onto its core, fatigue tripped him. He sank into a cane chair, boot heels on an orange crate, head resting against the humming projector. The beam still glimmered, silver dust swirling through it like the tail of a comet. He meant only to close his eyes for a moment. He did not dream of places he recognized. The floorboards dropped away, and he stood ankle-deep in phosphorescent sand under a carbon arc moon. To one side loomed a cliff face spackled with film perforations, each sprocket hole a porthole emitting faint organ music. A soft cough sounded behind him. He turned. Lila Vale stood there, shawl fluttering as if stirred by an unseen wind. Her face was not monochrome but alive with color. The auburn glint in her hair, the pale blush of her cheeks, eyes so blue they felt illegal. The miracle that throttled him, however, was not the sight of her. It was the sound that came next. "Mr. Finch," she said, voice low as dusk, "you finally made it." Words, actual words, full-bodied and liquid, slipped across the charged air. He gaped like a schoolboy who'd stumbled upon a mermaid. In all her films, she'd been impeccable at pantomime, yet here each syllable pulsed with warmth. He might have replied, but his tongue froze. Lila smiled, half amusement, half tenderness, and stepped toward him. The sand squeaked beneath her boots. "You needn't be frightened," she assured him. "I'm allowed to speak here, only here." "Where is here?" he managed. Even in dream, his voice sounded rusty from disuse. "Between the frames," she answered. "A province made of what audiences imagine when the piano starts. Your exhaustion opened the gate." She gestured to a far ridge where gigantic reels turned like suns. "But dawn will close it soon. Walk with me?" They moved across the beach of shining granules until the white moon shrunk to a pinhole. Lila spoke of cramped dressing rooms, of clunky cameras that guzzled sunlight, of directors who demanded tears on cue by holding lit matches under her fingertips. In this elsewhere, her grievances found breath. Theodore listened, dumbstruck, tucking every note of her alto voice into memory. Before answers outnumbered questions, the sand dissolved, scenery lights flared, and he jolted awake in the booth, heart galloping. Snow still freckled the windows. The projector's lamp had burned out, leaving only the smell of singed dust. He staggered home dazed, slept haunted hours, and emerged late afternoon pleading a fake illness to the manager. That night, he ensured all chores finished before 11, then folded his coat under his head beside the warm projector, willing sleep to return. The dream curtain rose at a pier sticky with tar. Foghorns bellowed, gulls darted through sepia sky, and a ship painted foam for background extras creaked at its moorings. Lila appeared in a pirate's coat, rapier at her hip, curls whipped across her brow. She greeted him like an old friend invited back to rehearsal. Together they navigated rope ladders, ducked through soundstage flats, and hid from cutout constables whose faces were blank glass plates. When they reached the quarterdeck, she leaned on the railing, eyes distant. "They say the talkies are inevitable," she murmured. "They'll stitch microphones into bouquets, hang them above our heads like nooses. The audience will want voices, real voices, until they forget we ever spoke with silence." "You have a voice," he reminded her, marvel bolstering courage, "at least in dreams." She regarded him, melancholy and hope waltzing behind her lashes. "Dreams end," she said, "and something is fraying in the reel that binds me. I can feel frames tearing, as though I'll fade entirely when the last splice gives way. How do we mend it? There is a reel, my lost reel. It was shot, never developed, then hidden when producers deemed it too ambitious. I believe my voice is kept alive inside it. If it's screened, the covenant holding me silent might shatter." Her gaze cut to him. "I can't do it alone. I need someone awake in the booth, someone who loves the flicker more than breath." Theodore's chest flared with a heat that bested any carbon arc. "Tell me where." "Night by night," she said, touching his cheek, "we'll hunt it." So unfolded a clandestine partnership, stitched of celluloid and rem. By day, Theodore endured the majestic slow decay roids of empty seats, muffled gossip of bankruptcy, the manager's groans at universal talkie fever. By night, he surrendered to sleep and rendezvoused with Leela on backlot dioramas spun from memory and moonlight. One evening, they dashed across a Parisian rooftop, chased by cardboard gendarmes. The next, they tangoed through a ballroom whose chandeliers dripped crystalline letters. Each setting bled into the next with jump-cut logic. Between escapades, they pieced clues: a ledger scribbled onto cemetery headstones, a key forged from ice, a compass nested inside a mechanical swan. He learned she loved blackcurrant jam, hated the word gumption, and nursed guilt that no applause could cure. She discovered he once tried to play cornet but quit after his father drowned in harbor waters. That loneliness drove him to memorize the mechanical size of machines because they kept reliable company. Intimacies impossible in waking life flowed freely here, where time stuttered and props changed without stagehands. Yet peril prowled the dreamscape. On the seventh night, while fording a papier-mâché river, they were ambushed by a figure dressed in a director's black trench, monocle gleaming. He wielded a megaphone like a bladed horn. Words lanced the air. "Cut! She stays in the can, Mr. Finch. The era moves on without her." Lila hissed the name Volker, then dragged Theodore behind a velvet scrim. Gunfire of flashbulbs cracked. They escaped when she sliced a backdrop and slipped through the tear into a field of poppies that sang ragtime. Afterward, she revealed the villain, Stefan Volker, avant-garde director who once pledged to immortalize her. When studios aligned with sound, he abandoned silent stars like obsolete scenery. He, too, lodged between frames, determined to rule the new order and consign the mute path to permanent blackout. In waking hours, Theodore scoured storage vaults under the Majestic, prying open rusted film cans. He found nitrate stock of newsreels, forgotten melodramas, but not the elusive reel. Each tin he unlatched felt like cracking a coffin. Meanwhile, management announced the theater's imminent renovation. A Vitaphone system arrived in crates, and the owner ordered the projection booth refitted. Theodore was told he'd train on the new equipment or be replaced by someone forward-thinking. He nodded obedience while dread boiled. If talkies colonized the booth, silent prints might be sold for silver content or incinerated outright. Lila's last refuge would burn before he found her voice. The line dividing urgency from panic blurred. On the 10th night, dream and reality bled at the edges. Theodore met Lila in a cornfield under thunderheads shaped like phonograph horns. She clutched a strip of celluloid, edges sizzling. Volker's accelerating the splice, she gasped. If we don't retrieve the reel before the Majestic's conversion, I'll unravel. Where is it? He pressed. I saw a white vault marked with a red lion. It sits somewhere beyond the montage corridor, where all scenes meet. The montage corridor was legend even in dreamland, a vertiginous passage compiled of every cut ever made, frames spinning like dominoes. Few survived its kaleidoscopic churn. Theodore swallowed fear. Then that's where we go. That day's dawn brought no peace. While new amplifiers were hoisted through the lobby, Theodore bribed a janitor for basement keys. He located a shipping crate stenciled with a red lion emblem of an old London distributor. Inside, nested among sprocket gears, lay a single unlabeled reel, vinegar fumes escaping like ghosts. The film stock glimmered, faint lavender. His pulse cannonaded. He smuggled it to the booth and hid it within a silent comedy's canister. Screening it without permission risked termination, but termination mattered less than oblivion. Night fell. He feigned sleep beside the projector but stayed half awake, one hand resting on the secret reel, the other clutching Lila's monogrammed gloves she had slipped him nights earlier. At last the concession between wake and dream parted. They stood at the threshold of the montage corridor. It resembled a cathedral corridor, whose stained glass windows were spinning film strips, each pane a snippet of every movie Theodore had ever threaded. Wind roared, smelling of ozone and nostalgia. Lila took his hand. Stay close, cuts can slice deeper than knives. They plunged in. Scenes whipped by, cavalry charges, moonlit kisses, collapsing tenements, circus elephants marching into fog. Gravity pitched sideways. Floors became ceilings, seconds dilated to minutes, then snapped to milliseconds. Volker's voice echoed through megaphones hidden in the vaulting. Stories evolve, my dear. Relics must bow. Spotlights strafed them, each beam pinioned bodies into freeze frames. Theodore shielded Lila as luminous scissors materialized, snipping stray bits of her gown. When her sleeve vanished to static, he pressed forward, shoving through swaths of footage until a door of blinding white appeared. They tumbled into a hush. A circular vault, all walls lined with silent silver reels, luminous like halos stacked to infinity. In the center, the lost reel floated in a glass pedestal, flickering with embryonic images. As Lila approached, Volker emerged from shadow. His coat tails writhed, stitched from discarded negatives. One lens of his monocle swirled with countdown numbers. He extended a gloved hand. Return with me, Lila, he crooned. Talkies require icons reborn. Let me graft your face onto sound. Together we'll outlive time, she recoiled. Icons become cages. I want to live, not loop. Theodore stepped between them, gripping a brass rewinder seized earlier. She's already alive. He swung. The metal rod shattered the glass, freeing the reel. Volker screamed, a sound like celluloid snapping under heat. He lunged, but Lila seized the reel and vaulted past him. Theodore followed. The vault convulsed. Shelves toppled in domino cascades. Perforated thunder cracked overhead. They sprinted, leaps bridging gulfs of disintegrating floor. Behind them, Volker's howl disintegrated into static. At corridor's mouth, a projector the height of a water tower waited, crank spinning autonomously. Lila affixed the reel onto the feed arm. Light it, she said. How? You are the projectionist. Her eyes glittered with unalloyed trust. He cranked the lamp's ignition lever. A sun blossomed. Light lanced through the reel, spilling monstrous images onto the sky scenes, unseen by any waking audience. Lila as a child, reading aloud from a weather-beaten script. Lila dancing barefoot in surf. Lila singing a lullaby in a language older than vowels. The images bled color, then sound rippled outward. Her voice, its timber-honeyed, resolute, swept the corridor. Frame stilled, wind died, and a hush so complete settled that Theodore heard his own heartbeat like timpani in a cathedral. Leela turned to him, relief softening every line of her visage. There, it's spoken. I am no longer bound. As she finished, the dream began to shear, brightness searing edges. He woke in the Majestic's booth with a start. Dawn hadn't yet threatened. Recalling the clandestine reel, he yanked open the canister. The lavender film lay intact, humming faintly as if saturated with bees. Shaking, he threaded it through the projector, spotlighting it onto an empty white card propped near the shutter. When he released the dowser, words poured, not through speakers, but from the screen itself, resonating like tuned glass. "Thank you, Theodore." He nearly sobbed. The grand reopening night arrived, featuring the theater's first talkie. Yet something within Theodore rebelled. Minutes before curtains rose, he spliced the forbidden reel to the head of the scheduled feature. The manager barked, but Theodore locked the booth door and cranked the motor. The projector coughed, then steadied. The audience, expecting peppy banter, watched as Lila Vale appeared in pristine resolve. Gasps rippled. She spoke actual recorded speech synchronized to lips moving with uncanny grace, recounting her passion for the art of silent storytelling, even as she welcomed whatever futures audiences might dream. Her final line pierced every row. "Listen not only with your ears, but with your hearts." The screen glowed white, then the scheduled talkie commenced, yet nobody cared about its stilted wisecracks. They sat stunned, wet-eyed, having heard a phantom speak downstairs. Ushers reported that when the last of Lila's syllables faded, so did a faint static underneath theater noise, as though some restless circuit had finally powered down. After the show, the manager, eyes shining despite himself, clasped Theodore's shoulder. "You've given us a miracle. We'll keep that clip as prologue to every program. The Majestic stays devoted to wonders, sound or silent." Later that night, Theodore lingered in the darkened auditorium. Dust hung motionless, waiting. He felt no tug of sleep, but drifted regardless. Dream welcomed him on a windswept plain dotted with Klieg lights like iron daisies. Leela approached, dressed in a simple summer dress, no longer flickering. She seemed entirely alive, corporal as sunrise. "This is goodbye," she said, smiling with peace rather than sorrow. "The real anchors me, somewhere freer now. I'll wander new stories, unhindered." "What becomes of me?" he asked, trying to keep voice steady. "You project," she replied, cupping his cheek. "Whether images or possibilities, that's what you do. Keep the lamp burning." She kissed him. It tasted of black currant and celluloid smoke. The lights dimmed, planes dissolved, and she stepped backward into expanding dawn. He reached, but found only warm air. The last he heard was her laughter, unscripted and triumphant, echoing over the rising sun. Theodore awoke in the last row, film leader flapping in the silent booth above. Outside, morning melted the marquee's frost. Workers hammered the new sound system into place, yet the whole building hummed with the echo of Lila's farewell. He strolled up to the booth and polished the brass arcs until they glimmered. Tonight he would run both sound and silent reels, weaving the past and present like twin ribbons of light. No era was truly over, he realized. It only waited for someone willing to dream it awake. Above the entrance, the marquee's new billing glowed. Majestic Presents Voices and Visions, a celebration of cinema. Beneath, in smaller letters at Theodore's insistence, featuring the one and only Lila Vale. He stepped onto the sidewalk, breathed icy air scented with popcorn, and turned his face toward daybreak. In the hush before the city's engines began, he could almost hear her voice, steady and confident, reminding him that screens were merely doors, and stories spoken or silent were the lives we dared to lead inside the dark.